Marinero, the Sick Podcast. And you can follow us on Facebook and on Instagram at the Sick Podcast on Facebook. Like it, share it with your friends. Here we are. It's Hockey Talk on this Sunday afternoon after the Montreal Canadiens played the Calgary Flames for the second time in 3 nights after losing on Thursday. The Canadiens last night, everyone was expecting them to bounce back because they had Friday off. They took the morning skate on Saturday off, and they did far from bounce back. They lost, and probably one of their worst performances of the season. Joining me right now from Global TV Montreal, Brian Wild. How you doing, bud?
Very good. Better than the Canadiens.
I can't figure this team out. For the life of me, Brian, I can't figure them out. Help me.
I don't know either. I got on Twitter and I basically said, I don't know. Because here's the thing for me, Tony. I mean, yeah, they were 24th and they got that free pass into the playoffs, essentially. And so you knew they were going to be 24th again, right? So they had 5 key elements. Very good players. I mean, not elite, but very good players. They had a net, good goalie. They had a defense, in Allen. They had a good defenseman in Edmondson. Maybe not what they needed. They needed a puck-moving guy, but a good defenseman. Then they got a ton of goals on the wings from Toffoli and Anderson. I mean, these are key moments. These are key acquisitions that the team has put into. And yet, where's the difference? Right? Where's the difference? When you add so much talent, you expect, 5 key pieces: Romanov, Edmondson, Allen, Toffoli, Anderson. Where's the difference? Why aren't they better? Why aren't they better, Tony? I'm throwing it to you. Back at you, buddy. Back at you.
I think the Montreal Canadiens are one of the most inconsistent teams in hockey. In the first 10 games of the season, I thought they could be a serious cup contender. For the next 10 games after that, I thought they would be a contender. And then for a lull of 5 or 6 games, I thought they wouldn't make the playoffs. And then I thought they would again, and they would be a contender again and all that stuff. Here's the deal, Brian. And for me, it's very easy. The reason why the Montreal Canadiens are one of the most inconsistent teams in hockey is because hockey games for, I don't know, probably about a decade now or close to it have been won at the center ice position. Yeah. And the Canadiens are just way too young and way too inexperienced to be good night in and night out. And that's why when Kotkaniemi has a good game, the fan base goes nuts and that he should play more. And when Suzuki has a good game, the fan base goes nuts and he should play more. So let's put the cards on the table right now. And it's probably an unpopular opinion because I like the kid. Everyone does, and it's probably asking too much. But the fact is that Nick Suzuki has not played good hockey in the last 10 games.
Yeah, no,
it hasn't been effective at all.
Yeah, and here's the problem, too. It's not just that Kotkaniemi and Suzuki are being asked to do too much at an age that they're not ready to do it. And we don't know what their ceilings are, and maybe they head to a higher level and become elite, but they're not now. And then you got to compound that with all the games that are against the North Division. If you look around at the first and second line centers around the league, everybody says, the North's weak. But at the center position, the North is strong. Stronger than any division. I looked at it this morning. You go out west, you've got, in Anaheim, an aging Ryan Getzlaf is the 1C. Look at the number 1C in Vegas. I mean, you at the center position, you can do way better than what these kids are being asked. You got to face Matthews and Tavares one night. You got to take on Scheifele another night. You got to take on McDavid another night and Draisaitl. I mean, even Monahan, you got to take somebody on all of the time. That's the elite. You could play 15 teams that Suzuki and Kotkaniemi would go, whew, this is a lot easier. So you got to add that. And let me just say one other thing here when we're talking about the center position, because you're exactly right. That's why they're stuck where they are and why they won't be able to elevate until those kids can elevate. Yeah. Everybody's talking about what to do with Phil Danault, right, Tommy? Yeah. Here's what I think: if they sign Phil Danault for whatever money, I think they're boxing themselves in. Because now, if they have as their 3 Cs, Kotkaniemi, Suzuki, and Danault, who's the elite in that 3? Now you're boxed in. Suzuki and Kotkaniemi, one of them has to become elite, or you're never winning the medal, just like all of the last 20 years. But if you You don't sign Danault,
Yeah.
now you're not boxed in. You've got a lot of money, you got a space open, and if Suzuki or Kotkaniemi don't find their ceiling and don't become elite, you've got the money and the space in the roster to fill it with someone. So I don't think they should sign Phil Danault until they could know, which they can't because the time is too soon, whether Suzuki or Kotkaniemi can be elite, and we don't know that yet. So no Phil Danault for me. What are your thoughts on my thought, Tony?
My thoughts are if that Phil Danault wants a penny more than $4 million and $4 million is the max,
yeah,
I can't give it to him. And it might be an
aren't they
unpopular
still boxed
opinion.
in? Tony, aren't they still boxed in if they give them 4?
Well, they're boxed in for sure. But listen, if I told you at the beginning of the season that on a team that could be a cup contender would have a third line shutdown centerman for $3.75 to $4 million, that's been what the National Hockey League has paid their third line centerman over the past couple of years. So I'm comfortable with that amount. The challenge is this, and Phil Danault's a good hockey player, make no mistake. But when you start asking for $5+ million, at that point, you got to be a very good hockey player, and you have to be able to generate offense. Mm-hmm. And Phil Danault generated offense when he was a benefactor of the Canadiens' lack of depth. So he played with their two best all-round wingers. Mm-hmm. He had the most ice time. Mm-hmm. He was put in the best situations, and he put up 46 and 53 points or whatever it was. When the Montreal Canadiens become a better team and they have to take that next step, at that point, Phil Danault won't have those line mates. Phil Danault won't get that ice time, and Phil Danault won't produce those points. So at that point, he's no longer a $5 million player. He's under a $4 million player.
Let me counter with this, okay?
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. If you said to yourself, I can get Phil Danault, he's my third line guy, he costs only this much, and that looks good. And I agree 100% with you. But I think Marc Bergevin's problem through the course of history has been that he is making individual choices on individual players, but he's not building a team. So I think in concept, I like what you're saying. But then don't we have the same Bergevin problem all over again? He needs a puck-moving defenseman. He goes get Edmondson. Edmond's playing great, but he's still shy puck-moving defenseman. He signs Phil Danault. Now he's doing great. He's got a really good third shutdown center, but now he's boxed himself in a hole that if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi don't turn into elite 1s or 2s, now you got 3 3s again. You understand what I'm saying? So I agree.
I understand what you're saying.
I agree. Great number. $4 million. Great player for 4. Brings a lot to the table. You know what I mean? Defensive type. A shutdown guy. I agree 100%. But now you're like, what if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi stop right here and not one of them becomes a 1C? Well, you've got those 3. You're boxed in. They're all 3 properties. And you know, as good as Danault is a 3. Problem is Kotkaniemi's a 3. Problem is Suzuki's a 2. Maybe Kotkaniemi's the 2 and Suzuki's also a 2. You still don't have a 1. You're still not winning the middle. You're still not winning the game.
So maybe one day they will have a 1. And this is the Sick Podcast, and it's brought to you by MyBookie. Use code SickPicks for a 50% deposit bonus. Bet, win, get paid. Brian, maybe the Montreal Canadiens one day will have that number 1 centerman. And maybe that number 1 centerman becomes Jesperi Kotkaniemi in 2 years from now. And maybe Nick Suzuki becomes that number 2 centerman in 2 years from now. The challenge is that in 2 years from now, Shea Weber is now 37 going on 38. Carey Price is now 35 going on 37. And or whatever it is. And you know what I mean? But you know, he might be 35, but he's going on 40. And the other guy might be 37 and he's going on 45. That's the challenge. The challenge is at the time that they tried to build the cup contender and develop the young players, they didn't coincide at the same time. That's the problem.
100%. 100%. You're going to see the maturity of these centers at the end of the careers of 2 extremely important pieces.
Yeah.
And so you finally, you know, like, let's take this from a construction point of view.
Yeah.
You got to fill a hole over here.
Yeah.
So you fill the hole, but you're using the dirt from the other location, and you finish filling that hole, and then you look over to the left and you go, "Oh my God, I just created another hole." And it's exactly what's happening. They're going to fill maybe the center hole if all that you've just said works out. Suzuki and Kotkaniemi find their ceiling, and God, people, give them some time. They're only 20. You know what I mean? Have patience here. Have patience here. I would give more patience to the 2 kids, less patience to Danault, who we already know the ceiling of. But you're right. It's all going to come together at the center position, hopefully, when it's just completely falling apart at the other position.
Brian, you say hopefully.
Now what?
The guy who's hoping more than anyone is Marc Bergevin. He's got no other choice, and I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people believe that he probably has one card left to play, and that's a blockbuster deal. The blockbuster deal for a team that's going up and down and up and down, when you make it and the player has to quarantine for 14 days if he's outside of the division, chances are that's not going to happen, because to make a blockbuster deal, you've now given up some important pieces to go out and get important pieces, and two teams are deprived of important pieces for 2 weeks, which could translate to 5 games, which can mean missing the playoffs. So in my opinion, the blockbuster deal is not going to happen, number one. Number two, if you're thinking that Marc Bergevin is going to trade a younger player and prospects to make this team better, he's already promised that he wouldn't mortgage the future even if his job was on the line. He's gone on record as saying that. So right now, if you're Marc Bergevin, you know what he's doing? He's hoping to God. He's crossing his fingers and hoping to God that Kotkaniemi takes 2 steps forward, that Suzuki takes 2 steps forward. And if they do, night in and night out on a consistent basis, the Canadians will be okay. And if they don't, they're going to be like this, up and down and up and down. And that up and down could even mean risking the playoffs.
Hey, we got one more big hole to fill, though, that we haven't talked about here. We're talking about the center position, and I agree with you just through, watching against Winnipeg, watching against Toronto, watching even against Calgary. It's a giant issue. But there's another giant issue, and it's a puck-moving defenseman. This is a team that he built that is just all, they talk all the time about speed and transition. Well, who can't speed and transition on the team? All those plodding defensemen. They got one guy that moves it up fast. It's Petrie. Mete moves it up fast too, but he's useless at other things. So it doesn't work. I mean, Mete's really great at moving it up fast. Great. Unfortunately, when the puck's in your own zone, you don't have the ability to move a guy out of the way. You don't have the ability to win a puck battle. So he's an incomplete defenseman, so you can't count him. They only got one guy that does, what they want to give a streaking wing or a puck or a streaking centerman a puck, and that's Petrie. Otherwise, they created a system that their own men can't even complete. So they need a puck-moving defenseman so badly, especially
100%.
That first pair, Tony, that first pair.
Yeah,
that's not a first pair anymore. Even when Ben Sherratt's on it, that's a second pair.
No, I know that.
It might even be a third pair.
Well, it is a second pair. Because guess what? Shea Weber's no longer the number one defenseman on the team. Jeff Petrie's the number one defenseman on the team.
Petrie. And it's 100%. And they got to start ice time in like that.
Correct. And we have to start saying that, because for the longest time, we've always been going on reputation, right? For the longest time, people have said Price is the best goalie in hockey. He's not anymore. And anyone who's realistic and logical knows that. So we have to say Shea Weber's no longer the number one defenseman on the Montreal Canadiens. It's Jeff Petrie. I mean, he is a hybrid. He does everything. Take a look at his goals. Take a look at his points. Take a look at his stats. He is in contention for the Norris Trophy. All right. So now, we talked about the holes. I can't agree with you more. I think Romanov is going to be that puck-moving defenseman. But once again, a young player who's going to still need a couple of years in the National Hockey League before he really becomes comfortable night in and night out and becomes himself. So now, let's get to this. What in the world happened in that hockey game last night? In probably the worst first period, or the worst period I've seen the Canadians play all season.
In that game specifically, Tony, I have no answers whatsoever for you. They have no excuses. I mean, they had a built-in excuse for Thursday. They had 19 hours between 2 games. But they had no excuse to be that flat, to be that bad against Calgary, a team that's trying to chase them. That was one of the most important games of the year. I mean, you could put them in the rearview window last night. Yeah. And instead, you invited them to the party. You invited them to challenge you for 4th place for the rest of the year. And they seem to have gotten a great bump from Sutter. Emotionally, psychologically, their intensity level way higher than earlier in the year. Now they got a battle on their hands, man. They got a battle now. They invited that battle for the rest of the year now.
Brian, Sutter has them playing playoff hockey, and the Montreal Canadiens are not playing playoff hockey, especially in their last 2 games, 2 losses versus the Calgary Flames. But last night, everything that could have went wrong. First of all, missed assignments. I mean, I thought it was... you brought up Edmondson earlier on. I mean, his plus-minus this year has been great, but last night was probably one of the worst defensive games I've seen him play this year after the opening night in Toronto, which was probably understandable. So I thought Edmondson was off. They got beat to puck battles. They got out hustled. Take a look at Mangiapane on Petrie. Take a look at Edmondson stuck in no man's land. Take a look at Matthew Tkachuk on the power play going to the net, and Weber and Edmondson, I believe it was, just leave him there, and he's in behind them, and they're winning puck battles, and they were hungrier than the Canadians, and the Canadians just nothing worked for them. And we talked about Suzuki before. Man, Suzuki got crunched yesterday. Once into the boards. And once when he and Corey Perry actually smacked into each other. And Phil Danault was hurt at one point last night in the hockey game, left in the first period, came back in the second. So they missed him. Suzuki had to go back to the locker room for the concussion protocol. They missed him. They were kind of like decimated at the same time. It was bad. It was a really, really bad effort. Hey, the last two efforts against Calgary have been so bad that this morning I went to the Montreal Canadiens website. Listen to this. And could you imagine the game versus Calgary on Thursday? It wasn't even there. Even the Canadiens website wanted to forget about their game on Thursday versus Calgary. That's how bad it was.
I bet you Saturdays isn't there either.
No, Saturdays is there.
Yeah, and you didn't mention Armia in that mix either, that giveaway in the first. But not just Armia. What he tried to do is beat two guys one-on-one, but also the very, very small amount of puck support that was around him. I mean, all of the guys that tried to find Monahan after the giveaway, they seem to have been about 35, 40 feet away. So, I mean, it was just it just
wasn't the worst part of that play, Brian?
What?
Is that the Canadians actually had all five players back in their zone.
Yeah.
And Calgary only had one player behind the net with Armia.
Yeah.
Who bumps Armia off the puck because I have no idea, the IQ on that play, what he's thinking that the best option with five players is to actually try and deke his way out of it.
Yeah.
And then Monahan comes in, and what a game for Sean Monahan. And I don't know.
You know what, though, Tony? There are ups and downs in a season, and I mean, I'm willing to just put those two games to the side because, I mean, look at Toronto. Great team, but they lost 4 of their last 5. There were ups and downs to the season. Like even Ottawa puts these really nice games together every once in a while. So I'm willing to kind of put that to the side. I think it's the overall construction that I don't like. I don't like how much onus is on kids to be that great and lack of patience for them. And I really don't like the construction of the D having so many plotters instead of, this is a new NHL where all 5 guys have to have all of the abilities. You know what I mean? That's how the game has changed. There's no such thing as a 4th line as fighters. 3rd line is just checking. 2 lines are scoring. Remember when we used to talk about that? That doesn't exist anymore. Defensive defenseman. The defensive defenseman. That's an offensive defenseman. That's a defense. Forget that. The new NHL is everybody has to have all of the skills.
This is what I think Mark Bergevin thinks. I think he thinks if he has a team that gets in the playoffs, that the way the game will be played and the way it will be called,
might be right. That's a good point.
His team will be comfortable and they'll be a playoff team. So those lack of puck-moving defensemen won't be as glaring a need and won't hurt his team as much in the playoffs as it does in the regular season.
And that's an excellent point. I think that's an excellent point. You're absolutely right. The game changes. They don't call it the same way. And then when you don't call it the same way, the players adapt. And it becomes more old style, old school Darryl Sutter hockey. 100% agree. 100%. But they got to get there first, Tony.
You're right about that. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Brian, from an excellent point to excellent officially licensed sports apparel. Go to sportbuffshop.com for all your officially licensed sports apparel and more. Use code SICKHoodies15 for 15% off on all your hoodies of all your favorite teams in the world of sport. All right, so now, games coming up in Winnipeg on Monday night and on Wednesday night. Brian, if they don't win those games, I'm going to tell you right now what everyone's going to be saying on Thursday. On Thursday, everyone's going to be saying the Montreal Canadiens are still the same team that was struggling right before Claude Julien got fired.
Oh, yeah.
The Montreal Canadiens beat the Vancouver Canucks because Vancouver's the Canadiens have their number. And they blew out Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago because Winnipeg was due for a bad one and the Canadiens were due for a good one. Brian, they need at least 3 out of 4 points in their next 2 games in Winnipeg, I think, to calm everything down.
No, I think they only need one win out of two. I know what you're saying. 3 or 4 would be nice to get to overtime in the other game, but I think they'd be fine if they take 1 or 2 and play well in the other game. I think that would satisfy themselves emotionally to pick it up and start to play some better hockey. I think that would be okay. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if they lose 2, you know what though, Tony? As we approach near the end of this, here's what I keep thinking though. How can this team that brought in 5 good players not be better than this? I mean, look where their goals are coming from. 2 of the new guys they brought in, I got like, what, 30, 35% of their goals? How?
It's very concerning because they brought in players that they really needed and are really helping.
Performing. Exactly.
And so I
Edmondson
get back,
is
Brian,
on the best pair.
Okay, so listen to this.
I mean, look at those 5 guys.
All right,
they're among the best players on the team. How are they not better than this?
So I get back to the point I made before.
Okay.
Remember the Canadians in the play-in?
Yeah.
Now remember the Canadians last year in the regular season?
Yeah.
2 completely different teams, right?
Yeah, around the same.
And for whatever reason, they look so much better in the play-in with the same players that they had during the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you take that team that played in the play-in and you add those 5 players, and I don't have an answer for you. I really don't. My only thing is all of a sudden a team that we thought for the longest time was more built for the season than the playoffs now is more built for the playoffs than the season. Other than that, I don't know. But I once again, it comes down to inexperience at the center ice position, the most important position in hockey in the last decade.
You know, and I love the way you framed that. I love the way you framed that. If you would have just said, let's forget all of the gaps here and forget all of the history and all of the nuance or whatever, and just bring it down to that simple statement.
Yeah.
Take that team in the play-in that beat Pittsburgh. Take it, look at it, assess it. Now add these 5 players. Anderson, Toffoli, a backup goalie at 930 instead of 880. Right? Romanov, way better on D. Edmondson, on the best pair on the team. Take that play-in team. Add those 5 guys. Where would you expect them to be? Not putting in 2 of the worst efforts of the season against the team they could have put in the rearview mirror Thursday and Saturday. But sucking, looking terrible at the low point of the season, perhaps missing the playoffs. That team that looked so good against Pittsburgh gets these 5 additional players who aren't underperforming. They are their best players, especially the 2 wingers. Come on. Figure that out. What isn't adding up here? What is not adding up? I mean, even Price is turning it around from his 880s to his 950s.
Price was not to blame for the game last night. If
and
anything,
the last 5
games,
Tony, the same percentages are 950, 960, 950, 940, 960, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the goalie. It's kind of crazy. I think it's this.
He's given up 7 in his last 5.
Wow. Okay, so I think it's this. I think you've hit on it at the center position. The play-in, those young kids look ready. Right now, they don't look ready. And the other is, I think that the first pair looked good in the play-in, and it's fallen right off the charts. Fallen right off the charts. Even before Sherrod got injured, that first pair had fallen off the charts. Right off a cliff. Boom. See this? Boom.
Is there anything that you would do with Suzuki to get him back on track? Because now they're essentially telling him, you're the first-line centerman on this team. We'll give you the ice time. We'll give you the wingers. And it hasn't worked out. It looks like he hit the wall. It looks like the sophomore jinx. Yeah. Is there anything that you could do with Suzuki to give him some kind of electroshock?
No, you can't. Not with these kids. You can't. All you can do is keep letting them grow. And that's what you were talking about earlier. That's such a valid point. Is there's no recourse for these kids but to let them grow. Puck on your stick, keep feeling this moment, slow it down. And the moment only slows down in your head, and the vision only gets better in your head from repetition. That's all you can do is keep the repetition up. Here's all the ice time, Kotkaniemi. Here's all the ice time, Suzuki. You guys are the future. Increase your reps. That's all. But what's the problem there? Yeah. It's going to take 2 years, and then the Weber, who's already struggling, and Price, whose body is breaking, that you got in that amazing interview the other day with Stefan Waite. Now what? You got a breaking body, according to his former goaltender coach.
Yeah.
And you got an aging body on the other side, and Shea Weber, who's already having difficulties with mobility. And now your centers maybe are coming of age, while your two main pieces, 10.5 million, and I've lost track of what Weber makes these days.
7.8 something. So now here's the deal. You have to manage Price.
Yeah.
You got to manage Weber.
That's right.
You got to give the young kids ice time, but maybe not give them too much so that they hit a wall.
Agreed again.
They're in a bad spot. Like they're just, I can't, once again, it all needed to come together at the same time.
And who said that like 8 years ago? You did.
Thank you.
Right? You said that like 8 years ago. You've been saying that since the first time I think I ever heard you.
Well,
if you want to build a winner, it all has to come together at the same time. Well, you don't build a cup while, you know, like 33-year-old gets 38 and the 19-year-old gets 24. That's not how it works.
I say this, and I thank you for that because I've been wrong more often than not. But so thank you for stating.
You know what, and you know what, Tony?
Times have been right.
That point often feels like when they're in a 5-game winning streak that you are wrong. But you know what the truth is? You're never wrong on that point.
Well,
you're never wrong on that point.
They better listen. They better hope it works out.
Because one way to construct a team.
If we don't, we all know what's going to happen. At one point, with all due respect to Marc Bergevin, he can't go in front of the press at the end of the year and say that, well, we didn't make the playoffs because of this, and a year after we didn't make the playoffs because of that. And
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what are you telling me? If they miss the playoffs this year, everything's going to be okay?
I'm going to agree. I'm going to say they will. I don't think they're going to fire him.
And you know what? And
I think he's got a longer rope than you think.
Hold on a second. And you know what? I've thought that often. And by the way, to be fair, I don't think that it's cool that if we all thought the moves were great in the offseason and we all thought he was the GM of the year, that we all crucify him at the end of the year if it doesn't work out, because then we're all wrong. We can't say I told you so if we were all wrong. But at the same time,
that's why I say he's got a long road.
Let's just say they don't make the playoffs this year. What can they say at the end of the year for everyone to say, okay, I understand, it's okay? What can they say?
We continue to build.
No, they can't say that. You want to know why? Because he said we're going all in at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean he's going to get fired. He's not getting fired. He's not. He's got a long rope, dude. I don't know how he's going to sell it, and I don't even care how people sell things. All I care about is that the team has a product on the ice that has the potential to be better and be a champion. And that's why I don't like Phillip Danault as the third-line center. Because I don't know yet, when they have to make the decision on Danault, if Suzuki and Kotkaniemi can find a ceiling that makes him a 1 or a 2. Okay,
Brian, whether he gets fired or not, if they don't make the playoffs,
he's not getting fired. That's my call.
We'll talk about that at a later date. But what I'll say now is that there's got to be, and I know he's often said, Marc Bergevin has, that he didn't believe in the window. Deep down inside, I believe, and I have always believed that he believed in the window, even though he said otherwise. I just don't think he wanted to put any pressure on him, the team, or anybody that the window was there. So I think he wanted to buy a little bit of time. Brian, the window is there for Carey Price and Shea Weber. We said it. They've been beat up. They've been injured. They're not going to get younger, and they're not going to get better. There has to be an expiry date here somewhere. There has to be an expiry date. And if the Canadians can't take that next step between now and that expiry date,
what is it, though?
The GM is Marc Bergevin or the GM is Brian Wild, the Montreal Canadiens are going to have to, once and for all, rebuild. And until we get there, we could keep on going the way they're going. But when they hit that expiry date on Price and Weber, and they can't get to the promised land, if they don't, they have no other choice. And whether Jeff and the ownership group wants to do it or not, they'll have no other choice. They'll have no other choice, because you can't get around it. And you can give me all the examples in the world of all you want that Buffalo was rebuilding and they never got better, and a couple of other teams were rebuilding and never got better. If the Pittsburgh Penguins don't draft Fleury at 1, Crosby at 1, Malkin at 2, And if the Washington Capitals don't draft Ovechkin at 1 and Backstrom in the top 4 as well, the Penguins don't win the cup and the Capitals don't win the cup. And if the Chicago Blackhawks don't draft Patrick Kane at 1 and Jonathan Taves at 3, they don't win the cups either. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're preaching to the choir on that one. I mean, there are failures and there's no guarantee. I mean, you've seen what the Oilers have done for a lot of the years. You've seen how long it's taken for Florida with high picks, how long it's taken with Buffalo for high picks. And yeah, there are failures. But the point that you're essentially making isn't about the failures. It's about the successes. And it's the successes that are the Stanley Cups. So you don't focus on the failure because the goal isn't to not fail. The goal is to win. And the wins are the system that you've just talked about.
And you and I
will
will
have to have 1,
week.
3. And there's no guarantee. Your 3 might be Kotkaniemi. Your 3 might be Galchenyuk. There's no guarantee, but there is one guarantee. That without them, without the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, you're not winning the cup. There's no guarantee that you will win the cup. The 1, 2, and the 3, but there is a guarantee you will not win the cup.
I hear you, bud.
1, 2, and 3. So you're preaching to the choir on that one.
Yeah, and hopefully you and I could talk about whether they won in Winnipeg or not, as the Canadiens have played 4 of their 6 games on the road. They got games in Winnipeg left on Monday night and on Wednesday night, and then they come back to the Bell Center for 6 games at home. Until we do it again next time, he's Brian Wild from Global TV Montreal. I'm Marinaro. It's The Sick Podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Sick Podcast. See you, Brian.